What's up, gang? Coach Bach here. We are talking about this study on squat depth. I actually covered this study 7 or 8 years ago, not long after it came out. I did a series of posts on Instagram about it, but I'm going to do it again because my good buddy John Evans over at THP posted about it on Instagram earlier this week. So I, of course, have to respond. Okay, so this study was looking at the topic of squat depth and specifically with trained athletes. So, we have a whole big body of research looking into training at long muscle lengths versus short muscle lengths, training with, full range of motion versus short range of motion. And that research, largely supports training at long muscle lengths for general strength, hypertrophy, increase in fascicle length, increase in power, increase in vertical jump, right? Like all these things. But that research is generally done on untrained subjects. Okay, so this study was looking at if we take trained subjects and we look at the influence of squat depth on their vertical jump and sprint speed, what are going to be the results? All right, so they had college male athletes in the study. They all had to squat at least 1.5 times body weight to parallel in order to qualify for the study. And then they did 16 weeks of training in which they did squats twice per week. And they had a quarter squat group, a full squat group, and a half squat group. Okay. The quarter squat group at the end of the 16 weeks had the best results for their speed and vertical jump. Okay. So, obvious slam dunk for quarter squats. This totally validates them. This totally validates joint angle specific strength gains. This totally validates track athletes doing quarter squats instead of regular squats, all this stuff. Or does it? Okay, let's cover some things about this study. I'm not going to put all the screenshots up. I'm going to link the paper in the description so you can go right to the full paper and read it if you want. And you can, double check everything I'm saying. But we're just going to go through some key points here. So first thing is we are totally clueless on the other activity that these athletes were doing. Okay, which is just a big gap in knowledge, right? It's a big gap in our ability to interpret the results. Okay, so you have 28 college male athletes. 24 of them were football players, American football players. And then they had, I think, one track, one wrestling, and two basketball guys in there. So they're pulling from different sports and also pulling from different schools, okay, different colleges. So it's not as if they all have some uniform sport program going on or sport schedule going on. So we're just left completely in the dark about that. And yeah, it's a huge question mark, right? Like, are the football guys, are they doing sprints and conditioning in the off season along with the strength training program? Are they running routes? Are they doing nothing else? Is the wrestler running sprints? And if the wrestler isn't running sprints regularly, well, then are we going to expect him to get faster regardless of what his strength training program is, right? The basketball players, I mean, we can assume they're playing basketball, but again, if they're not doing actual sprint training, are we expecting them to get faster just because their squat goes up, right? So there's just a big question mark there, and that's not a point in favor of quarter squats or full squats or anything. It's just a huge lack of information, okay? So that's my first point. Now, next point, and this is, probably the biggest one, is there is no control group, okay? And in this case, the control group would be a group that does no squatting, all right? Now, if we read through the study, you're going to see that squatting was not the only thing that these subjects were doing. They were all doing power cleans. They were all doing lunges and step-ups, albeit it says it was a low volume of those, okay? So apart from the squatting, they already have somewhat of a strength training program in place, right? Power clean, lunges, step-ups twice per week. That by itself is already kind of like at least a strength maintenance program, okay? And so, if we took out the squatting entirely and just did that, what would be the results of that group? And I personally think that group would get probably similar results to the quarter squat group, okay? because you essentially have a relatively easy strength training program that's going to be, enough to maintain strength, but not get in the way of sprint and jump adaptation. Okay, so certainly if you have a group of college football players who are already reasonably strong, and you give them an easy strength training program, and then certainly if they're like sprinting and jumping, doing plyometrics regularly, then I'm going to expect them to get some speed and jump gains without any squatting. Okay. And this is again why it would be really helpful to know if they were doing some sort of sprinting or conditioning program, right? So yeah, I think you take the squats out of this study entirely, and I think that group still gets good results. All right. And so that lack of a control group then really, for me, it completely removes any of the evidence for quarter squats. Okay. What it really just tells me is like doing the more disruptive strength training, aka the half squats and the full squats, that kind of put a limiter on the speed and jump gains, at least during this period of 16 weeks. It doesn't really tell me that adding quarter squats caused any improvement. Okay, so I think that lack of a control group is huge. All right, and then if we do consider, the program at large and the other groups, I'm a big believer in deep squatting because I think it's very potent as a general strength stimulus, right? And also, I think the narrative of like joint angle specificity is like way overstated. But still, if I took college football players, okay, college athletes who already squat 1.5 times body weight at least, and I have them deep squat twice per week for 16 weeks, I'm not going to expect them to be sprinting and jumping their best after that, right? That's a long period. That's 32 deep squat workouts, right? That's going to be disruptive, potentially fatiguing. But apart from the fatigue, just simply the adaptations to squatting deep, lifting at that deep range of motion, that is potentially disruptive. I would say almost certainly disruptive for speed. Okay, so that's a situation where they did get significantly stronger. I would say they built potential. In order to realize that potential, they would have to back off of the squatting, maybe just remove the squatting entirely, right? Definitely modify the strength training and then prioritize the sprinting and jumping for a period. And then they would probably see some really great athletic results. Okay, but you need that peaking period, so to speak, to see that potential be realized. So again, like the fact that the deep squat group didn't really get significant, I mean, there's statistically it was there, but it was like pretty minimal improvements. To me, that doesn't tell me that deep squats don't work. They need to be used within a bigger picture plan correctly. Next, if we consider the vertical jump, so this was a standing vert on a vertec is how they did this. If we're talking about joint angle specificity, the quarter squat group was going 55 to 65 degrees of knee flexion. The half squat was 85 to 95, and the full squat was 110 or more. If we're thinking about joint angle specificity in the vertical jump, almost certainly the half squat and the full squat would actually be more specific there, right? Because very few people only bend their knees 55 or 60 degrees in order to do a vertical jump, right? That's actually pretty uncommon. I would say some young untrained athletes who have very little strength might do that, and then also you do get the really freaky sprinters who don't bend their knees very far but then still do a standing vert very high, and that's they're just kind of crazy. The vast majority of like strength trained male college athletes are going to go down to 90 degrees or maybe even more for their vertical jump. There's just no way that a 55 to 65 degree knee bend quarter squat was actually at a more specific angle for their vertical jump. And yet, the quarter squat group did get the best results in the vertical jump. And so tell me, did the joint angle specificity really cause that? I don't think so, because I don't think the quarter squats were actually more specific in that case. Again, I think this is a matter of the quarter squats are less disruptive, right? They're basically just getting out of the way. Whereas 16 weeks of deep squatting twice per week is definitely disruptive. Okay. So I just don't think the joint angle specificity narrative is validated here at all. So I don't find this study to be compelling evidence in favor of quarter squats. Really, I mean, not even a little bit, right? I am still open to the fact that some study could be more compelling evidence, but this one just is not. Okay. Now, another topic that comes up when it comes to this debate is, of course, anecdotes from track and field, right? So you have people that say, "Oh, well, I was doing." Well, track and field people don't usually do deep squats, which is a shame. But I was doing box squats or I was doing half squats for this period of time, and then when I switched to quarter squats, then I got faster and my times improved. Yeah, okay. So you removed a more fatiguing, more disruptive stimulus, and then you got faster. Okay. For every one of those anecdotes, there are plenty of other anecdotes where somebody just stopped lifting altogether and got faster, right? Or they stopped squatting altogether and maybe just did some explosive lifting, okay? And they got faster. So we got plenty of anecdotes where people sort of take away the general strength stimulus and then get faster. So your anecdote where you took the general strength away and added quarter squats doesn't really give us any additional evidence about what quarter squats can do. So in the end, I'm not against anybody's approach here. I think everyone, or not everyone, but it is pretty popular to use sort of this general to specific approach. For me, it's just not a matter of just joint angles though, right? For me, when I go from general to specific, I want to go like actually specific, which means I'm inclined to just not lift, right? Or minimally lift. I've used different approaches. I have I have cases where I've said, yeah, just don't touch a weight for the next month, right? I've done that, or even like 3 months I've done that, right? But then there's also the approach of, okay, you're just gonna like do some loaded jumps and maybe a little something for your hamstrings to maintain strength there, and that's it, right? Or maybe we're gonna go just trap bar deadlifts and some leg extensions, right? So I have had cases where I have female athletes that are jumpers, and I want to make sure that they don't lose any quad strength. Okay, if they were just sprinting like 100 meter, 200 meters, I wouldn't be too worried if like their quad strength faded a tiny bit like late in the season. But if they're doing long jump and especially triple jump, like I don't want to lose any quad strength. So I will use a shorter range of motion quad strength exercise, but that would not be a barbell quarter squat. That would be typically on a machine. Okay, so I would go with either a leg extension or a single leg hack squat where they literally just can't go any lower than maybe about 70 degrees of knee flexion or so, like less than 90 for sure. Okay, so that would be my approach to training like a shorter range of motion strength exercise. I want to make sure it's doing the quads, it's hitting the quads. The free weight, the barbell quarter squat, to 60 degrees of flexion only, I think you're really just testing how much weight you can hold on your back there. I don't think you're really even getting much of a strength stimulus on the quads. So that's my approach. And if you want to do quarter squats, fine. But I would just question like how much the quarter squats are actually adding to the formula, as opposed to just, the key being what you are removing from what you're doing and how you're allowing, you're getting strength training out of the way and allowing your sprint and jump and plyometric capabilities to be maximized because of that. Hope this video is helpful.